Good morning, everyone. This is Gautam.
Good morning, everyone. This is Harish.
Um, uh, Today, I think we'll sort of keep it light on the discussion around the API management capabilities, what it can do for you, and so on, but really focus on how do you actually build and expose APIs using the Workato platform. And in specific areas, we'd also call out some of the newer features that are coming up. The sort of for the purposes of building and the demo that we will do, we are going to be using the newer version, which is already has been available for some months on our Workato's preview area. Just in terms of APIs, gateways, API management, and so on, sort of the principle is really simple. You want to expose API endpoints that are actually not just outside of your firewall, making it available to your partners and customers, but also they can be used internally. So once you have an API endpoint, you can actually have someone write custom code. Hello. So sorry, I think we heard something. So once you have once you expose an API, that you start thinking about different ways to consume it, and sort of the most popular common approach today still is writing custom code. Then of course you can use a traditional integration platform to connect to this, because it is at the end of the day exposing REST endpoints. Of course, Workato recipes is a very common among our customer base, at least, as in you're creating APIs by using recipes, but you're also letting your partners connect to these APIs using Workato recipes as well. And there are several of our customers where the use cases is such that they make these APIs available to an extremely large group of partners, and in those cases, they package up and make recipes available. Um, so with Workato recipes, of course, the recipes allow you to connect to several hundred different applications that we already have connectors to, which means that when you write a recipe and you expose that, essentially you can bring data from any of these different applications. You can have very custom specific logic, and then you expose it. And you can have a API endpoint that is just using all recipes, but you can also use code. I mean, we support code actions, so you can actually take you can write your logic in any sort of any programming language that we support, and then expose that. And of course, you can also use our SDKs. We have a ground SDK, which is Java based, that runs within the Workato application server that you can deploy within your network. You can also use our Ruby Cloud SDK, where whatever you write is managed by us. Um, and here are a couple of examples that I'm sort of going. The really broadly speaking, there's a couple of sort of different ways our customers use our API management capability. One is where I think this is the most common one, is they essentially create these APIs and expose it to their business partners. I think one of the most popular ones that we see, and I'm sure it's sort of true for the community at large, is some sort of status, especially order status or shipping status. One of our customers that is in the logistics business, they expose a set of endpoints that provide information on, where is a particular package in terms of delivery, so that their partners, instead of calling them through calling them or reaching out through support channels, they can just use these APIs to directly call and get information. The other one is also inventory status, which is sort of the other side where suppliers can provide inventory status to their partners without actually having to go through a support interaction. We also see a lot of use cases where API are used internally. So, for example, a very popular set of APIs that we see is around customer information. Customers create customer 360 where they're basically getting information about a customer from the different applications that customer data may already be in, and then expose that as an API, and then hand those APIs out to other parts of the organization. Of a specific example, there is one of our customers has a process where when their customers come in, they go through a bot that services the customer and walks them through actually a funnel and information about what are sort of the pending tickets that a particular customer may have. All those are exposed as REST endpoints, which are in turn implemented as Workato recipes, and then from their bot essentially calls these APIs. There's a couple of advantages. One is, instead of having to write this piece of code every time, you're essentially, making the process of building these easier by calling an API that's been built so that everyone else can use. And the other is actually security. If this particular customer information is in SAP, you don't want to make that information, those credentials available to the creator of the bot. Instead, it is fronted by an API, which can give very fine-grained security in terms of what specific endpoints can they call, and then allow other parts of your organization to get access to sensitive data through that. So I think, sort of in terms of background, I hopefully that gives a good sense, and just wanted to jump in to sort of the product itself. So Harish, perhaps we could sort of build a recipe or use an existing recipe to create an API endpoint, and then work backwards into sort of the different set of capabilities that we have once once an API is available. How do you version it? What kind of policies can I put around it in terms of rate limits or the number of actually times an API can be called, and the concept of collections and our dashboard that provides real-time operational insight into it. So Harish, can we actually jump into creating a very simple API?
Okay. So I guess before we get there, I probably want to talk about API collections. So that is for this exercise, API collections are the starting point. So API collections are a way for you to logically organize related APIs. Typically it might be maybe you have a collection for managing orders. Maybe you have a collection for managing customer-related APIs. So typically they're organized by functional area. So here, let me log into the site and so here is an example. I have a collection called Acting Partner API, and as of now, I have 4 API endpoints here. So 2 get endpoints and 2 post endpoints. I also have a recipe. Let's say in this case I have a very simple recipe. Let's say that this recipe, for the time being, it's it's simply returning whatever parameters that you have given to me.
So when you are creating an API, you're creating a recipe that is ultimately going to be consumed through an API from an API endpoint. It has to have a special trigger.
Special trigger. So basically, we have a trigger called callable recipes. Now, what's interesting is the same trigger can be used for invoking the recipe from another recipe, or also invoking a recipe,
through an API.
Through an API. In the previous version, we used to, there are certain subtle changes that have happened to this trigger compared to the version that we had before. Anyway, let's look at the configuration of this trigger, right? So you give a name, and in this case, I just gave the name as greeting, and I have an input schema and an output schema. Now, in the past, we used to configure, how this API is exposed. So at this stage, recipe doesn't really know anything about APIs per se. And so in this implementation, we have simply returned, what the message that is sent to us. Now I can go to my, API collection and say that, okay, I want to add this specific recipe as an endpoint. Okay, so what I'll do is come in here and I'll say this is a endpoint called greeting, and
so Harish, so we gave the callable, when creating the callable recipe, we gave a name. That really has no bearing on the API name. So ultimately the name of this API is going to be some path / greeting.
That's right.
Okay.
So in this case, recipe saying hello to person. Okay. Now here I'm choosing how I want to expose this API and this recipe as an API. I say that it's a get method. Okay. And the path.
We support all the different sort of HTTP
methods. Yeah.
Okay.
So and then the path here, I'll say that it's let's say greeting. Now, what is important is the actual schema for the payload format is set in the the schema that is set in the
at the recipe
level, both input and the output schema. If it is get, then you're sending it as query parameters. If it's post, you're sending it as a JSON body. So at this stage, I have registered this endpoint. Registering the endpoint doesn't mean that it is accessible to the entire world. So,
and also in this particular example, you added this new API endpoint to an existing collection.
Okay. So how does this look like? For example, if I click through this, so here I see the documentation for this endpoint. Right? It says that the actual URL for this is this, and then if I had given any description in my recipe, that will show up as the documentation for the endpoint, and here's the description of how exactly how it's going to work, and I can actually test this also.
So basically, it's sort of the input parameters are listed and the response message is listed, and all of this conforms to the schema that we created in the trigger for the callable recipe.
Yes. So you have the recipe running, but that doesn't mean that endpoint is exposed to the world, and you have registered the endpoint. That doesn't mean that that endpoint is exposed to the world. Only when you activate the endpoint. So this is again a security aspect of the thing. So you have full control about fine-grained control about maybe you're testing the endpoint right now, so you don't want to expose it yet. So you have full fine-grained control for the API.
Okay, and so the one part is security, and then the other part is essentially the set of things, the quality of service that you want to associate with how this can be accessed. And for that, we had to think about that from a customer of the API perspective.
Yeah. Okay. Here I've activated the endpoint now. It's a very good question. So now we have a concept called clients. So the way it happens is, let's say that you built a dashboard, you built a collection of APIs. Then next part is the distribution of the API. So you will let's say in this case you might have 10 users for this API. So then you're going to go and create a profiles for them. In this case, we have a customer called ABC Consulting. Now, once you create the customer, you are specifying creating access profiles for them. Access profiles are nothing but a way for you to generate API tokens, and also, associate certain policies. What do I mean by policies? Policies are like if you want to have some sort of a rate limit rules for them. If you want to have some quotas saying that in a month only 10,000 requests should be submitted. Maybe your rate limit will be, per minute you're only going to allow, 10 requests. And then if you want to do IP whitelisting, if you want to do IP blacklisting, so all of those things you'll be able to specify at the at the access profile level.
So for this demo, would it take too much time to actually create a new client? A client, just for terminology perspective, is the set of folks that I want to make this API available to.
Yeah, we can create a new client. Let's say we add a client called what is that? Star Consulting.
So there's a number of questions. Should we take them now?
So, yes, the path was, in the past, path used to be set at the recipe level, and we got a lot of feedback on it saying that, hey, we want to manage it outside, and when we go to the new version, all the old recipes will be kind of concurrent, and they'll be migrated without any contact. So old endpoints will continue to work. So it's as though when you're working, moving from old API implementation, old API version to the new API version, there will be one new collection that is created by default. So can we change the custom domain? No, we don't have that.
We don't support it at this point.
At this point, yeah. The question was, can we change endpoint URL to have custom domain? We don't support it at this time.
What is the next one?
For callable recipes, can you set up some authentication? We'll come to the authentication part. The authentication, essentially is set up at the when you're creating the access profile. There is a token that gets created, API token. So you need to have the API token to in order to access the API.
And we're going to sort of create that now, so it'll be clearer when we do that.
Yeah. Okay, in this case, let's.
So just to get back, we are creating a new client.
A new client. Okay. So after you create a new client, you need to you're creating an access profile for this client. So let's say that I'll create a default access profile, and then I need to choose which are the APIs that I'm going to give access to this customer. In this case, let's say that I'm going to this specific API that I created, I'm going to give access to.
And I guess the purpose of the access profile is to allow a single security token to that a customer can use to collect to multiple API collections. That's why we have this concept of access profiles.
Access profiles. Not just that, and also you might be able to. I guess let's say that you, as a company today, you released account management features as an API. Okay, and then next you released order management as an API. Now, a customer who has account management access, it's possible that for both of those modules, you want them to have the same key. That's one reason. And the second reason, of course, access profiles are really for, it allows you to tie policies to access profiles. Right? It allows you to tie access policies to access profiles. Your security policy and enforcement policies. Policies like for rate control, quota control, and IP whitelisting, so on and so forth. So in this case, let's say I have a default policy. We'll come to the and I'm not going to add any whitelist.
Can we talk a little bit about the policy?
Policy. I think it's better if I show you your policy, right? So in this case, let me go to
So at this point, Harish, what we have done is we've essentially created an access profile for client star consulting. And the access profile comes with a API key. And this API key allows them to access the Acme Partner API only. But if we had wanted, we could have selected multiple collections. And the policy, just because we haven't talked about it yet, it was you just pick the default policy, and then we're going to go back, look at policies, and come back and perhaps use a different policy.
Okay. So let's go back to the management. So if you look in here, there are various policies. Now, policies, interesting thing is they are just a statement of, your different policies that you have. They're not tied to a customer. They're not tied to a collection per se. So, you are independently declaring the policies. Let's look at a business policy.
So the policy is basically to offer different qualities of service to your clients, depending on the kind of relationship you have. Exactly. So you may have like really important customers for whom you want to offer very sort of the ability to sort of have extremely low latency, or the ability to sort of make any number of calls a month and so on. Yes. So it's basically to offer different qualities of service, and that grouping is a policy.
Yes. Because in the past, basically, you have for all the customers, you could say that it's the same policy, right? So this allows you to kind of control the policy. So let's go back to the client. Let's go start consulting. So at this stage, now I might contact the person at the start consulting. I might actually give him the token, give him the token and ask them to start using the APIs. Of course, the other thing that I'm going to share with them is a URL to the API portal. So this API portal is provides a complete documentation for the APIs that they have access to. So at this stage, what I did was, I'm accessing this portal from an incognito window, and so if you see in here, it shows that they have access to one collection, and if they click on the collection, it shows that there are 3 endpoints that are available, and when you click on a specific endpoint, they'll be able to test it, and play with the API. And of course, they would need a API token. That API token, you will share it with them. Should we answer some?
So Harish, I think there's a lot of questions, but let's take the first one, which is, can one path point to 2 separate recipes? And the use case here is like for A/B switching, like while they're working on a version of the recipe, can they switch?
One path point to for versioning, basically, what we do. We have support for versioning.
It's not version like while something is live and they want to take that something offline, right? So can they switch between 2 variants, if you were to think about it?
The recipe.
Yeah.
Well, because you can, because the recipe is not bound to that. It is the endpoint, the path. You can switch to a different recipe if you want.
You could switch.
And we have a question. Currently, the API requires the cookie from the browser to use the API, makes it difficult to use programmatically. Will that change?
I'm not sure which API they're talking about. See, these are the business APIs that you're creating using the platform, right? So those are always token based. I'm wondering whether they're talking about they're using some internal APIs.
So just to clarify that, the tokens that we supplied do not rely on any type of sort of.
It's not cookie based. It's header. It's header. In the header, as long as the key is there.
And the next question is, for authentication, is the API key the only way, or does it support basic auth, OAuth, other OAuth mechanisms?
Well, for the time being, it is API key. We have had the request for basic auth, so we'll see based on the demand.
And this is more elaboration on the policies, like what kind of security policies can our customers implement?
Create, yeah.
Security policy. I'm hoping that
you're going to the policies back.
I think we covered it, right?
It's okay. We can go back and talk about what are the different types of things that you can control in a policy.
Okay. So there are three aspects that you can control. You can control the rate limiting. You can have the quota, and then third is IP blacklist or whitelist.
Okay.
What was the?
I think we're good. We can move on.
Okay. So now what we'll do is we'll try to invoke one of the APIs that we just added. So this is the greetings API is the API that we just added, right? So what we'll do is we'll go to Postman, and so this is the URL. Oh, sorry, we have conveniently given a copy. Okay, so now we need to add a header called API token, and then the value for this is interesting. So we have to go to one of the one of the profiles that we have created, access profiles that we have created, and we got to get the key from there. So let's go to this, and for the time being, I'm going to use this particular profile. And then parameters, if I remember correctly, there was a parameter called name, and then say. Okay, so we simply echo the message back, and it returned the data. Of course, the way we have to think about this is now every system that Workato can connect to, you have access to them in a recipe, and you'll be able to construct very interesting APIs to return data, very interesting APIs to affect data. You are creating a customer, and then you have to update 3 different systems before you can actually return. So all the unique, basically all the usability aspect of building an automation is available to you when you're building a recipe endpoint. So the other 2 important submodules within the API management is the dashboard, and the dashboard basically gives you the overview of what is going on across your APIs. It's going to tell you what are the total number of successes, what are the errors, and how many policy violations that you've had, and then again you can narrow it down by a specific customer, and then you can narrow it down to a specific collection, and all the way to the endpoint you'll be able to see. So for example, we just gave a request, and then hence it's and you'll be able to measure the response times at the endpoint level. The other aspect is looking at the audit logs. You can get the audit log of all the requests that you've received, and the response times.
So this is the call that we just made from Postman.
Yeah.
That showed up in the log.
That's right. So and you can narrow it down, to a specific customer or a specific collection. Again, the same way. So it allows you to do the debugging of the or accounting of the API is much easier.
And in terms of sort of the sort of getting building a recipe that is going across multiple applications. Is there sort of a recipe that we can show for that?
Yeah, that's a good. Not this one. No. There is okay. Let's add a. We have we have a pretty good recipe for creating a customer. Let's say we're going to create. Sorry about that. I think I'm pressing.
And while you're sort of going through this, Harish, oftentimes, right, I mean, we have an API collection, and then we want to sort of share some specification of that to a business partner. So what do we support from that perspective?
Okay, that is so every API collection, we expose it as a you can download a Swagger or open API spec of that endpoint. So you will be let's look at the actual dashboard that we have. For example, in here I can download the open API spec, and so this is a Swagger JSON. So this is a definition of all the endpoints in there. It conforms to the OpenAPI spec, and you could import it into, let's say, Postman. You could import it into any, or you could generate. There are tools for generating actual stubs in different languages. Okay.
And sort of talk. I mean, how are errors handled? You want to sort of specifically throw certain types of error codes.
Yeah. So basically, you got the stop with the error option. So so not stop with error. When you're replying when you're sending the reply for the recipe, you have an option to say that you want to send it with the error. So then whatever error message that you send back will be sent to the customer, to the requester, and the API will fail in that case. So it is not 200 okay, it will fail. Earlier, you were asking a question about a typical example of a service recipe, API recipe, right? So here is an example in which the endpoint for creating a customer. So when we receive the request, we create the customer in QuickBase, and also we create an account in Salesforce. And then
and just going by sort of what you were just saying in terms of error codes and so on, is sort of the best practice here is to try to enclose that in a try-catch block.
Well, I mean, in this case, we're kind of demonstrating an example of how we can do compensation in case it fails. So you want to delete the account if you have created one, and then return the error.
I see.
Yeah.
So just for folks that may not know, so this is sort of this is the equivalent of a try-catch block for Workato. So anything that is in the monitor block, if there's an error that is associated with that, it then triggers off the set of actions that you want to take in response to that. I think you termed this as compensating actions in the catch
in the on error block. Yeah.
Okay. So I think there's quite a few questions. Should we pause to take some of them? Yeah.
So Harish, the first one is, can client registration be done through API that is programmatically dynamically, or does it always require customer to come into the Workato interface?
Yes, there is an API that is in the works for registering the endpoints also.
Okay, that's part of the platform API.
Platform API.
So I think Saurav has elaborated more on the cookie question that he had, like the requirement.
Oh, so I guess here this question is mostly about, I think, see, there are two APIs, right? I think this question is really about the platform API. So they're trying to, I'm assuming that, can you increase the size of the thing? So for browser cookie question, we access our recipe using recipe ID over REST post method to start a recipe. Works from Postman once I log into Workato. Oh, okay. You don't really have to. There is a platform API that you can use for actually starting stopping recipes. So if you go to, I think it is.
So, but anyway, just sort of at a higher level, we're talking about something else, right?
Yeah.
This capability is about our customers
Creating
API endpoints and exposing that internally or to their partners. Then Workato has a platform API that offers a set of capabilities that through an API, and they're
two separate
two
things.
separate different capabilities.
Yeah.
Yeah, Saurav, we'll follow up with you in an email to help you with that. It's unrelated to what we're talking about now. The next question from Jay is the client and profile a known attribute within the recipe after the endpoint is called?
Oh, this is a good question. That is not, but I think it is actually a very useful suggestion. We can see if there is a way for us to pass the context, the request context.
So Harish, the one other question that has come up, like as we're looking at the dashboard, there is success and error, right? And when like multiple API requests are made by a partner, for example, right, whoever is consuming it, how does Workato support alerting or setting thresholds, like if there's a, for...
So at the at the API, the gateway level, we have features that are in the works wherein which you can specify saying that okay, if this many policy violations happen, alert us, or if the performance degrades, for over a period of time, then you alert us. So there'll be email alerts.
Okay. And is there, can Workato recipes be
so
monitor and...
Workato recipes can be used for monitoring,
Okay.
as always. So all of these things, you have a trigger where recipe ops trigger can be used for monitoring these errors and then generating custom alerts. I was talking about doing it at the gateway level.
I think the most popular question is the different authentication types, and and you mentioned that currently it's a API key based, but we have now roadmap to support other authentication types.
Yes. Yeah, especially I guess both auth 1 and the basic auth we have heard. Let's come back to the so Gautam, one other thing to talk about is the the type of the APIs that could be built.
What do you mean?
Essentially, these recipes, the fact that we are connecting to multiple, systems, it kind of naturally enables us to build certain type of APIs, which are typically, which would have been typically much harder in the past.
I mean, you mean that instead of having to write code, you're essentially using recipes to build this?
See, the thing is, as we went through this exercise, one of the things that is, as customers are using it, one of the things that is becoming very clear is, there is a lot of work that has gone in the industry around the gateway aspect of the thing. But ultimately, when it comes to implementing the recipes, again, you run into the same issues of, basically it's a month-long exercise for you to actually build the recipes because you have to connect to multiple systems. You're writing code in Java or whatnot, and there is no fast iteration. I've seen people put APIs together, just like how they build automations, because just like automations, your API endpoint also undergoes several iterations. So they're able to quickly iterate these changes by making minimal changes at the recipe level. Quite often, these changes are around how the payload is constructed and where the data is retrieved from. So then maybe you want more data, maybe you want less data, maybe you want to perform additional action. So those iterations you're able to do much fast because the implementation of ultimately it really comes down to implementation, because typically in all other platforms they tend to say that okay, implementation is a black box. It's your problem. Somehow you're going to do it. And we're going to take care of rate limiting, we're going to take care of tokens, this, that, and all. So we've seen people use it without actually without making a heavy decision of using a API gateway, let's say, because API gateway it's a pretty big decision that you have to make to switch to or start using.
So Hari, one very important question. There's a lot of interest based on the questions, and when is it available for the general public? When are we expecting to make it available? All these announcements to the general public.
It's sort of scheduled for end of Jan, and also I think much of this is already available today. If there's anyone that actually wants to get access to this sooner, definitely feel free to reach out to us, and we can sort of make that possible.
Okay. Folks, thank you for attending and all the questions. Hopefully, this gives you a preview of what's coming. And as the feature gets released and you start using it, if you have additional questions, do reach out. We'll put some, there will be content documentation and additional resources, blog posts around this feature. So do reference those. And if you have any additional questions or need help using API management, need guidance, do reach out to us. We are here to help.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.